All right, so today we're diving into something I know a lot of you have been thinking about. Gender representation on the Billboard Hot 100. And, we're going beyond just the hits you hear on the radio. We're looking at like decades of data, trying to uncover the hidden trends and like the cultural insights behind who's charting and when.
Yeah, it's really fascinating how much we can learn from something as simple as, chart data. And, we're not just looking at the numbers themselves. We're going to be using a specific lens, a gender lens, to analyze the average number of Billboard Hot 100 entries. So we're going to look at solo male artists, solo female artists, male groups, female groups, and mixed gender groups over time. And it really does paint this fascinating picture of, who has had a voice in popular music.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Are you ready to dive in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Data on the screen, numbers come alive. Male, female flows where the patterns thrive. Visual charts, public colors unify. Gender decoded, bringing truth to light. Small drum fill. We break it down, real talk. Trends unveiling, facts from every block. Here's your insight, watch the data glide. Gender decoded, let the beats collide.
So we're going to be looking at the charts, like all the way from the 1950s to today.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah, it is a pretty big span of time.
So we're talking Elvis to like Billie Eilish.
Exactly. Vinyl to streaming, all those massive hits, and it really makes you think about like who's been driving the trends, who's been at the top. Has it been a boys club or have things changed over time?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
So lucky for us, we've got this awesome analysis to guide us. It's called Gender Dynamics in the Billboard Hot 100. A historical analysis. And it's got some really interesting insights. I think you're going to find it pretty fascinating.
Well, and I think what's really cool about the Billboard Hot 100 is that it's kind of like a cultural seismograph, It's not just about who's selling the most records or getting the most streams. It really reflects like changing social norms, artistic expression, even how technology shapes who gets heard, which is something we'll talk about.
Yeah, for sure. So let's dig into some of the details here. This chart from the analysis, it maps out the average number of chart entries across the decades, and it breaks it down by, male groups, solo male artists, solo female artists, and then mixed gender groups too.
Okay, yeah.
And what really jumps out at you is that for like a huge chunk of the early years, it was very much a man's world, especially if you look at groups.
Yeah, especially like the 50s and 60s, right?
Exactly.
You think about like the giants of that era.
Yeah.
The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Elvis Presley.
Wow.
Those guys weren't just musicians. They were like cultural icons. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like they set the trends in fashion, in attitude. Like they shaped what it meant to be cool. And you combine that with like the marketing power of the music industry at that time, and it really cemented their dominance,
It's kind of wild to think about how much influence those few acts actually had.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just groups either. Solo male artists, they consistently held their own on the charts too.
Yeah.
Like it makes you picture like a time capsule of those years, what was playing at the sock hop or on everybody's transistor radios.
Right.
It was a very specific sound.
It was, yeah. But here's where it gets really interesting, right? So while all those like mega male acts were topping the charts, there was this steady, maybe initially quieter presence of female solo artists.
Right.
It's almost like a slow burn building up to something much bigger.
And I think it's interesting to think about that in the context of like what was happening in society at the time.
Yeah, definitely.
Because this wasn't just about like individual talent, this rise in female solo artists. It really coincides with some major social movements,
Oh, for sure.
The push for women's rights, greater representation in all kinds of fields. It almost like the music industry started catching up to these like cultural shifts that were happening all around it.
Right, and I think we can see that reflected in the type of music that was being made too.
Yeah.
Like in the 1980s, you have someone like Madonna.
Yeah.
Right? She was challenging these traditional ideas of femininity and sexuality, just using her music as a platform,
Yeah.
Then by the 90s, you've got artists like Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey, like just massive commercial success, those powerhouse vocals,
Unbelievable voices.
ballads that resonated with this growing female audience,
Totally. Like, talk about a power shift.
Yeah.
And it doesn't stop there.
No, not at all.
Like, think about the 2000s with Britney Spears, Beyonce, and then later Taylor Swift, Adele, Rihanna. These women weren't just singing, they were becoming global icons.
Right.
Controlling their narratives, wielding influence in ways we hadn't really seen before.
It's really a testament to both like their talent and the evolving landscape of what audiences wanted.
Right.
This wasn't just about bubblegum pop anymore. It was about women expressing their experiences, owning their sexuality, achieving success on their own terms.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that shift in representation on the Billboard Hot 100, it really mirrored those changing social dynamics. It's actually pretty powerful when you think about it.
It is. It really makes you reflect on, like, the artists who impacted you personally,
Yeah.
Were there any female artists who particularly resonated with you?
Oh, so many.
I know, right? It's like a whole soundtrack to our lives.
Absolutely.
But, while we're talking about groups, there's this whole other category that often gets overlooked. It's kind of like the hidden gem of the Billboard Hot 100.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's the mixed gender groups.
Oh, yeah.
They've been this constant presence, haven't they?
They have.
Never quite hitting those, like, stratospheric peaks of, the mega boy bands or the solo superstars, but always there, adding something unique to the mix.
Yeah, their story is particularly fascinating to me because, like, their presence on the charts often lines up with these periods of, like, really intense musical experimentation and collaboration.
No, that's really interesting.
Think about Fleetwood Mac in the 70s, right?
Yeah.
The interplay between, like, the male and female voices created this, like, iconic, almost mystical sound.
Right.
And even today, we see that, like, mixed gender collaborations often lead to some of the most innovative, genre-bending music out there.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if there's just something inherently richer about that mix of perspectives, that creative tension between male and female artists.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to be said for that, like the synergy that comes from that kind of collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to remember, these mixed gender groups weren't just about, romantic partnerships.
Right.
It was often about a shared creative vision, this willingness to blur genre lines, and a celebration of, diverse voices coming together.
I love that.
Yeah.
But, okay, we got to talk about the elephant in the room, the digital revolution that just, like, totally shook up the whole music scene.
Oh, yeah.
Platforms like YouTube, Spotify, even TikTok, it's like they completely changed the game.
I mean, it's hard to remember a time before streaming,
It is, yeah.
And that shift had a huge impact on the dynamics we're talking about here.
Absolutely.
The Billboard Hot 100, it used to be all about record sales and radio play, and now it's like
Right.
streaming numbers, download counts, online engagement,
Right.
It totally changed how we measure success and who can achieve it.
Exactly. It's not just about landing a record deal anymore.
Right.
Artists can, like, bypass those traditional gatekeepers,
Mm-hmm.
build their fan base online, potentially reach a global audience without needing a major label.
That's huge.
It's a whole new ballgame, and it's had some really interesting effects on, like, who's at the top of the charts.
Oh, yeah. It created this much more fluid and dynamic landscape.
For-
And while we've seen some positive shifts in terms of, like, diversifying the voices that are being heard,
Right.
it's also raised all these new questions about how we measure success.
Yeah.
What it even means to be a chart topper in this digital age,
Mm-hmm.
and how gender dynamics are still playing out in this, like, evolving musical ecosystem.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, I mean, we've gone from this era of, like, larger-than-life icons dominating the charts
Right.
to this landscape where, like, anyone with a laptop and a dream can potentially reach millions.
It's kind of mind-blowing.
It really is, yeah. It's incredible and a little bit intimidating, too, when you think about it.
It is, and it makes the future of music that much more exciting and
Yeah.
unpredictable,
Totally.
It's like we've got this foundation of all these incredible artists who paved the way,
Mm-hmm.
and now we've got this whole new generation coming up with
Yeah.
different tools, different platforms, a whole new set of possibilities.
Right, it's wide open.
It is.
So, okay, we've set the stage. We've kind of explored these historical trends, gotten a glimpse of how technology is changing everything.
Yeah.
But what I'm really curious about is, like, the why behind it all,
Or why?
Yeah, like, why were male solo artists so dominant in those early years, what were the specific challenges that, say, female groups faced?
Right.
And how has this all played into the representation that we're seeing on the Billboard Hot 100 today? Like, where are we now after all of this?
Yeah, let's dive into that.
All right, let's get into it.
Yeah, it's a complicated story for sure. And I think you're right to want to go deeper. Let's start with those seemingly invincible solo male artists.
Okay.
It wasn't just about raw talent, right?
Okay.
It was about how they were perceived, how they were marketed. They were often portrayed as like these rebels, these visionaries,
Right.
these like almost larger than life figures who embodied this like certain kind of swagger, a certain kind of masculinity.
So it was almost like they were selling a whole image,
Exactly.
a lifestyle, along with the music.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Like think about Elvis, right?
Yeah.
The way he like shook up those conservative 1950s with his hip movements and his like rebellious spirit.
Right.
Or someone like David Bowie in the 70s, constantly reinventing himself, blurring lines of gender,
Right.
challenging like all these conventional notions of what a rock star could be.
Right.
These figures weren't just musicians. They were cultural icons, setting trends, pushing boundaries. And that image combined with the sheer power of the music industry back then,
Right.
really amplified their reach, their influence.
It makes you think about how those early trends might have set a precedent for how male artists were marketed and perceived for decades to come.
Well, for sure. I think it definitely played a role. And it really contrasts with the challenges that were often faced by female artists,
Right.
particularly in those early decades. While they were always incredibly talented women in the industry,
Of course.
they were often navigating this whole different set of expectations and limitations.
So you're saying that even when women were making incredible music, they weren't necessarily given the same platform or the same freedom to shape their image as their male counterparts.
That's a key point. Yeah.
Okay.
And it connects directly to the experiences of female groups as well. They've had these moments of incredible success, right?
Yeah,
Breaking records, selling out stadiums,
for sure.
but maintaining that momentum has often been a different story.
Why do you think that is? What are some of the specific hurdles that female groups have faced?
Well, I mean, for one thing, there's often been this tendency to market them toward a narrower demographic,
Okay.
focusing very heavily on a young, often teen audience. And that kind of limits their potential reach.
Yeah.
And it can create this perception that they have a shorter shelf life, a more limited window of appeal.
So it's almost like there's this unconscious bias that assumes that female groups are a trend, a fleeting phenomenon, while male groups are seen as having more staying power.
I think that perception is definitely there.
Yeah.
And it can influence how much investment they get from record labels.
Right.
How much airplay they get on radio stations.
That makes sense. If the industry itself isn't fully backing them,
Right.
it's obviously going to impact their ability to break through and achieve that same level of consistent long-term success that we've seen with some of the major male groups.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's also the historical context, how female artists have been portrayed, sometimes being pigeonholed into specific genres.
Right.
Or expected to conform to certain images
Right.
that might not align with their creative vision or allow for the same kind of broad cultural influence as their male counterparts.
And those expectations can be incredibly limiting, right? It's
Yeah.
there's this invisible box that female artists are sometimes expected to fit into.
Yeah.
And if they step outside of those boundaries,
Right.
it can be harder for them to gain traction or be taken seriously.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that kind of brings us to another fascinating aspect of this whole discussion.
Okay.
The rise of collaborations, particularly between male and female artists.
Right. We talked about the consistent presence of mixed gender groups. But what about those collaborations between solo artists or artists from different bands?
Yeah.
Those seem to be more common than ever.
They are, yeah, especially in recent years.
Yeah.
And I think it speaks to a couple of important shifts. First, I think it suggests this growing recognition that creativity really flourishes when when different voices and perspectives come together. It's about breaking down those traditional silos.
Yeah.
And embracing the richness that comes from diverse collaborations.
So it's almost like a rejection of that old boys club mentality.
Right.
And an acknowledgement that, like, great music can come from anywhere, from any combination of artists, regardless of gender.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And second, I think it reflects the changing landscape of the music industry itself, with the rise of digital platforms, the ability for artists to, like, connect directly with their fans.
Right.
There's less reliance on those traditional gatekeepers.
Right.
More freedom to experiment, to collaborate,
Yeah.
to create music that defies those old categories and expectations.
So in a way, technology has been a democratizing force, right?
I think so.
Like, it's empowered artists to forge their own paths, create music that resonates with a global audience without necessarily having to fit into those, like, predefined boxes.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, like, are we witnessing a shift not just in the charts, but in the very fabric of the music industry itself? Maybe we're moving towards a future where gender becomes, like, less of a defining factor in how artists are perceived, marketed, categorized.
That's a really exciting prospect, actually.
It is.
But, while we're on the topic of technology, we have to circle back to the digital revolution and its impact on how the Billboard Hot 100 is even calculated.
Right.
I mean, streaming has completely changed the game.
It really has.
It has.
And it's fascinating to see how those changes are reflected in the charts.
Yeah.
We've gone from this system that was primarily based on, like, record sales and radio airplay to this world where, like, streaming numbers, digital downloads, even social media engagement, all factor into the equation.
Wow.
It's a whole new set of metrics.
Yeah.
And it's made the charts more dynamic, I think. More reflective of how people actually consume music today.
Right, yeah.
Exactly.
It's not like we're all, going to the record store every week anymore.
No, not at all.
It's a totally different experience.
Yeah, and it's created opportunities for artists who might have been overlooked in the past.
Yeah.
Like, if you can build a dedicated online following.
Right.
If your music is resonating on streaming platforms.
Yeah.
You can potentially make a real mark on the Billboard Hot 100, even without, like, major label backing.
Wow.
Or traditional radio play.
So in a way, streaming has given, like, power back to the listeners.
Yeah, I think so.
We're the ones choosing what we want to hear, curating our own playlists, discovering new artists through algorithms and recommendations.
Yeah.
And that collective listening behavior is directly influencing the charts now.
That's a powerful shift. Yeah.
It is, yeah.
Like the Billboard Hot 100, it used to be seen as this barometer of industry influence.
Right.
But it's becoming more of a reflection of what people are actually listening to,
Right.
What's truly capturing their attention.
Yeah, like, it's almost like a real-time feedback loop now.
Yeah, it is.
Between artists, listeners,
Yeah.
and the charts themselves.
Absolutely. And it makes predicting the future all the more intriguing, don't you think?
It definitely does, yeah. I mean, we can analyze the data, we can track the trends.
Right.
But ultimately, like, the future of the Billboard Hot 100, the music industry as a whole, it's in the hands of the listeners now.
Yeah, it's about what resonates with us, what moves us, what inspires us to, like, hit that play button again and again.
Right, exactly. It's about what we love, what we connect with.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's kind of wild to think about, like, how much the music landscape has shifted, even just in the past, like, few decades.
Yeah.
From those early days of, vinyl and radio to, like, today's world of streaming and personalized playlists.
Right.
It's crazy how much the way we, like, experience and consume music has totally transformed.
Yeah, and that transformation is really mirrored in the evolution of the Billboard Hot 100, right?
Totally.
It's this chart that's constantly adapting, reflecting, like, changing tastes,
Right.
the emergence of new technologies, and this ongoing conversation about representation and inclusion in the industry.
Yeah, it makes you realize that the Billboard Hot 100 isn't just, like, this static list of songs, right? It's like a living, breathing document of our cultural evolution, like a snapshot of who we are and what we value
Yeah.
at any given moment in time.
I love that.
Yeah, and as we've seen in this deep dive, the story of the Billboard Hot 100 is like inextricably linked to the story of gender dynamics in music,
That's
from
right.
that early dominance of male groups and solo artists to the rise of like female empowerment anthems.
Right.
And the increasing like prominence of mixed gender collaborations.
Absolutely.
It really does reflect this ongoing push for greater representation and the breaking down of traditional barriers.
And it's a reminder that music has always been this powerful platform for social change, right? A way to challenge norms, to express identities, and to connect with others who share our values and experiences.
Absolutely, yeah. And as we look to the future, the question becomes like, what will the next chapter of this story hold? What new voices are going to emerge? What trends will shape the soundscape of tomorrow?
It's exciting to think about all the possibilities,
It is, yeah. Like, will we see even more female artists topping the charts? Will mixed gender groups finally achieve that recognition and staying power they deserve?
Right.
Will streaming continue to like level the playing field and create opportunities for artists from all backgrounds?
Those are questions worth pondering.
Yeah.
And while we can't like predict the future with any certainty,
right,
one thing is clear. The music industry is in this constant state of flux.
Yeah.
It's driven by technological innovation, shifting cultural values,
right,
the ever-evolving tastes of this global audience.
And that's what makes it so fascinating to explore.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought.
Okay.
The Billboard Hot 100, it's more than just a chart, right?
It is.
It's a reflection of who we are, where we've been, and where we're headed as a society.
It's a testament to the power of music, right?
Yeah.
To connect us, to inspire us, and to like challenge us to think differently about the world around us.
I love that. That's a great way to put it.
That's good.
So keep listening, keep exploring, and keep asking those tough questions.
Yeah. Because the conversation about gender representation in music and the evolution of the Billboard Hot 100,
right,
it's far from over.
And who knows, maybe you'll be the one to shape the next chapter of this incredible story.
That's awesome, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.